Talk Shoes. Recorded live.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the May 29th edition, 2015, of the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Show, which is a service of the BlackScienceFictionSociety.com website. I'm your host, William Hayashi, and tonight's special guest is Kai Leaks, and she has a series of books. Do you call it the Sin Eater series, Kai?
Hi, all, and no, I call it the Devotion series.
Okay, the Devotion series. And she's got that going for her. We're going to find out a little bit about her. No, we're going to find out a lot about her, because you can find out a lot about a person in about 2 hours. But first of all, let me ask you, where are you coming from?
I am from and sitting in St. Louis, Missouri.
And how are things down there?
We're doing, as good as it can be, considering everything. But everything is easy peasy in my area of St. Louis.
Well, that's kind of a pretty busy part of the country in terms of, events in almost the last year, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And the anniversaries are coming up and everything, so it's going to get even more interesting.
Yeah, just if you don't mind us talking a little bit about it, because, a lot of people read what's in the newspapers and things like that. Is there anything about, what went on? And for people who may, I'm just going to jog your memory, this is where Michael Brown, a young teen, was shot by, I forget the police officer's name because I'm old.
I just call him Mr. Wilson.
Yeah, well, I just call him White Gunslinger myself. Was shot by a police officer, not at point-blank range, excuse me, and the wounds on Michael Brown's body indicate that he was probably either trying to hold his hands up and running away at the same time. Anyway, but I mean, it certainly has set off quite the firestorm of controversy, and it has brought an issue to the forefront that a lot of people don't realize. I think most people think that what we're seeing in the news with all of these shootings is something pretty recent, that all of these things have been going on. But I would say, if we were to be entirely honest about what goes on in this country, what happened down in your neck of the woods has been going on for over 400 years.
Yes.
So, excuse me. I'm sorry, everybody. I'm getting over a cold. I don't let myself have a cold for over 72 hours. But we're just under the line because it hit me on Wednesday. I volunteer with a bunch of kids all the time, and I swear to God, they're nothing but germ buckets. But that, as I affectionately call them. Anyway, is this where you've lived most of your life?
Actually, it has. I mean, I'm not originally from here, but I lived here long enough to be called a St. Louisan, so yes. Right.
And where were you born, and where did you start out early?
Well, early years, I was born in good old Iowa City, Iowa.
Uh-huh.
And then I only stayed there until I was around 5 or 6. And then we stayed around in the Midwest. So we moved to Kansas, Wichita, and then Alton, Illinois, and then eventually to St. Louis.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in middle school when I moved to St. Louis. So around 6th grade.
Yeah. And I don't know how old you are or anything like that, but I mean, did you go through almost all of your schooling in that area as well?
Yes, I did. And I'm sorry, I came to North County, St. Louis in 7th grade, so I was around 12 or 13,
right.
And I went through the Missouri public school system since that age on out. I was, for those that are in this area of North County, I went to Riverview, so I was a Ram. Blue gold.
Okay. Yeah.
And graduated and then went on to Mizzou, which is the University of Missouri, Columbia. And here I am today.
Pretty cool. Now, I would say right now you would be, most people would call you an author, correct?
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't, but other people.
Well, no, I'm just talking about other people. Well, it's the same thing with me. You know, people go, oh, you write books, you must be an author, and I go, no, I am so much more than that. But you know what I'm saying? You know, well, when people look at you from the outside, you know, they tend to judge you by whatever your most visible accomplishments are.
Right.
And if that were true, if they knew the truth, they would be calling me, oh, you're William, the guy who managed to stay out of jail and prison all his life. See, that they don't see. But I mean, when you know, I'm thinking, you know, as a writer, you probably had some inkling that you were going to be a writer at some time. I mean, did you have an interest in writing when you were a lot younger, or is this
Honestly,
something that kind of came to you? Yeah, sure.
It just like came to me like I was always a reader since little.
Uh-huh.
My mother invested a deep love for books in me, and so since a wee one, I was always in these magical little fantasy world with my books and making up, you know, stories to draw because my note of creativity is art, so I was drawing a lot and reading a lot and playing with my toys a lot. And then as I got older, it was only when I was a teenager where I started the oral part of, you know, being a storyteller started coming
Right.
to me. And I used to just orally think up stories and tell them for my cousins at slumber parties and create, you know, actual stories for them to entertain them when they spent the night. And then that just, from there, I never wrote anything until I was, an actual full wrote anything until I was in college. And I'm 33 now, so.
Yeah. Hey, look, I was like 40-something when I all of a sudden thought, oh, man, I should write a book. So, I mean, it's not always – well, no, seriously, I was kind of like you. I read a lot. You know, I started reading a lot even, 7, 8 years old. And through all of that time, I never thought about being an author. I think when I started reading Star Trek books, I thought, oh, I could write something like this, but, it never happened. And then come the time, my mid-40s, an idea came to me, and it came to me born of a few things. It came to me born of, I had some extra time on my hands, I was getting a divorce, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there were some changes in my life, and writing kind of filled a little bit of a hole there. So no, it's not an impossible thing. It certainly must not be unusual, because there are a lot of people that I know who started writing late. And so when you started writing, were you doing short stories? Did you jump right into your series, the devotion series? How did that work in for you?
Well, it started off where I was writing little things, but I never finished. And all through school, and then I graduated, and then I was going through a bout of like seriously major depression because I was transitioning out of college, and I was back home, and nobody was hiring. Funny thing, still thing going on in my life right now. But anyway, nobody was hiring, and I was just like, okay, I need to do something to get my mind out of this funk, out of this, mode of I'm not doing anything. And I ended up writing a full novel, which was going to be a trilogy, and that was my Fire and Ice series, which was kind of an epic fantasy kind of thing. But I haven't done anything with it at all. So that was my first full novel that I wrote on my own, and I had no intentions of submitting it or anything. It was just something I just needed to get out, that energy. And so that's how I first wrote my first story.
Well, and that's kind of like a lot of people are like that. I mean, I don't want to say driven in a bad way, but I want to say driven in a good way. They do have something in them, a story in them, or some kind of epic tale in them, and a lot of people don't manage to get it out. A lot of people will start and then stop, and then there are those who plow right through.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so what was the genesis of the idea for the story?
For the first one? Well,
yep, the very first one.
Well, at that time, I was reading a lot of. I've always been attracted to fantasy, so I was
Mhm.
reading a lot of historical fantasy romance novels and a lot of. I think I had around that time was finishing Lord of the Rings. Um, I was like just all over the place with my reading because that's just how I am with reading at that time. I was seriously addicted to Barnes and Noble, so I used to sit in that sci-fi fantasy section, and just sit there and look around and see if I could find anything. I also at that time was reading a lot of L.A. Banks, so
Mhm.
she kind of led me to that spark of saying, okay, I can write an actual character that looks like me, a female that is strong, that can, carry her own and kick butt. And why don't I try to, formulate it around what I like, which was at the fantasy, epic, epic fantasy stories and things like that. And that's just how it happened because Fire and Ice is like, I call it a Paragon series, which is, it's dealing with a lot of magic. People coming up, wake up one day with a hope of magic, and they don't know how, don't know why. And you have this woman that is led on a quest where she finds out she's part of a bigger scheme of things with this whole new world that she fell in. And so it just went from there.
Mhm. When you were younger, like preteen years and things like that, was your imagination tracked in this way? I mean, when you said you were an avid reader, and when so when you pick up other books, they've kind of maybe led you to your own stories in your head. Is that fair to say?
Yes. Yeah, because I was influenced by my books, by everything I watched on TV. Like I stayed watching cartoons and stayed watching, going to the movies and just immersing myself in those kind of genres that I like, which was fantasy.
Sure. Okay, and so when you craft a story, obviously you have to kind of build a universe for the story to be in, unless you cheat the way I did, and I just chose real life. But I mean, when you put all that together, and it's like your very, very first offering, could you tell us a little bit about what were the most important things that you started out creating? I mean, were they characters? Were they the universe? Some people will create like a Bible of their universe, talking about all of the aspects of their creative universe. And some people start out with characters and an idea for what they're doing. And you mentioned, having a strong female characters and things like that. Which side of that did you work on, or were you able to blend them together, pretty easily?
Well, every time, even before I even started writing, it was always a character would pop in my head.
Okay.
And then from there, they would show me the world that they were in and the time. And with the oral stories, they weren't even fantasy. They were like what, our teenage wishes of what we could be living like at the time,
right.
and where we could be living at the time. So it was grounded in reality. But, it always starts off with a character in my head introducing themselves, and then they walk me around and show me the world. And then from there, then now that I write more, then the story plot starts slowly coming. And sometimes I don't know it until the end of the story, what the ending is supposed to be, and then sometimes I do. It just depends on what that character wants to reveal to me.
Yeah, I tease everybody, when they tell me about, I got a new story. I go, do you have an ending? And well, I mean, I do, because for me, I start with an ending, and then I'll write, I want to have a good ending, an ironic ending, or one that's powerful, or one that's kind of misdirected and unexpected ending. So I'll think of a really cool ending, and then with my dumbass self, I'll write, 500 pages just to get to that ending. So my process is different. But, I mean, I think it's good that I wonder if you get better three-dimensional characters out of your method, because if you conceptualize a character out of whole cloth, where you put them together, these are their motivations, this is the kind of person they are, these are their goals, things like that, I would think that it might be easier to not only create them but also create the subsidiary characters around them, because what you're doing is you're creating an interactive universe rather than just a universe. You're creating interactive characters.
Yes.
Do you use people around you or even your own internal personality to help draft your characters, or do you have a really good imagination and you can put them together without, Ray's example of being an idiot, so, well, you know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, sometimes it just depends on the situation. Like, okay, with my very first novel and Senators, I did actually know an ending for those two, but they ended up changing. They ended up changing with the characters. So how I developed those characters or who they are is influenced around who is around me, but those nodes of things only come in when I need to fill out who the character is and make them, more than what they are. Because usually the characters themselves just tell me who they are. And then from there, I add in maybe some influences around me.
Right. So, and some flavoring.
Yes.
So, like your first book, how many words was the first novel, your first novel?
Oh, that one, I found out that I write a lot. All my books are thick books. So it's only recently that I started trimming it down. But my first novel, I probably can pull it up now and actually tell you, because I still have it on my computer, funny enough. And so...
Now, you have to update your about the author thing on Amazon. When was the last time you went in there? Well, it says currently she resides in Chicago, Illinois, and I haven't seen you anywhere.
Yeah, I
didn't see you downtown. I haven't seen you on the north side. I haven't seen you on the west side. And I don't get to the south side as often as I used to, but I haven't seen your butt around at all. So I'm just...
I moved back home around 2013. So.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
well, I guess you could be forgiven. I guess you could be. Because I'm reading that and I'm going, I haven't seen her anywhere.
I was on the south side, actually. So that's where I was living.
Where were you? Yeah, where were you living?
I was living in Inglewood.
Oh, okay.
That's where I was.
What?
So St. Eaters is you will see Inglewood and St. Eaters.
That's fine. I'm actually building a computer and 3D printer manufacturing plant in Inglewood.
Oh wow! They would love. Yes.
We're bringing 300 tech jobs to that community, and we're not letting any white folks in the suburbs come in, take those jobs, take the money away, and then go home. These are tech jobs, and we're going to train the people for it. We're going to train them in that neighborhood, and we're going to try to do, community development and revitalize Inglewood. I mean, they're bringing a Whole Foods in there, not far away, and the Whole Foods is going to have the Whole Foods is going to have kind of a different pricing structure. So I think that there are a lot of whites who will go to that Whole Foods thinking that they're going to get a better deal. No, I'm serious, and it's going to create a little more traffic into the community. And what
but they already were coming for the houses that were abandoned anyway. So the gentrification over there.
Yeah, but they were flipping them. They were flipping them. They weren't going to live in them yet. It's not like over by Cabrini Green, where you have. Well, we don't need to talk about gentrification of Chicago neighborhoods. But no, it's interesting that that's where you were, and, now I'm getting ready to work in that area for the next couple of years to make this happen. And let me ask you, did you enjoy living in Chicago? I always like to know if people like my city.
I loved it. It was just very expensive for a broke college student. I couldn't find any work, so it was. That was the only part. If I had found work, I would have stayed and been okay.
Yeah. Now, when you were in college, what did you major in?
I ended up graduating with my MA in counseling.
Okay. Yeah, I got a PhD in clinical psychology still in the shrink wrap. I don't even know if I can get a job at this, as old as I am.
I was aiming for my PhD.
Well, More power to you if you get one.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go back. Let's go back to that first novel. I mean, here you go, jump out of the box. You're going to write this novel. You got this idea, and about how many words did you throw in there when you were done?
127 plus.
That's a good size.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a healthy size. I mean, you talk about writing long books,
mm-hmm.
but I can't write a book less than 200,000 words to save my life. So, and how long did it? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I've shortened my writing with that too. Now I don't write that thick anymore. But yeah,
right.
I do, but I don't. It's like a healthy medium now.
Well, I think the better writers probably get better over time. You learn things. And one of the things that I'm trying to learn brevity. I'd like to write less, or I'd like to have less words but still have an effective story. So in that respect, I think I'm still learning, as an author.
Mm-hmm.
Do you do short stories at all? I'm sorry, go ahead.
I have just recently started doing short stories and I actually finished them. So
Mm-hmm.
I've done 2 so far.
Yeah.
And then I've done shorts on my website, and then this recent Sin Eaters devotion book series trilogy kind of thing. I just did a short book which I'm going to make into its own series, which relates to Sin Eaters, which is Rebel Guardians, and that was a short for me for that world.
Now, do you want to talk about Sin Eaters a little bit, the devotion series?
Sure.
When you put that together, is that the one you said that was going to be a trilogy, or is a trilogy?
Yes. Well, the first book was supposed to be a trilogy. This one was also supposed to be. Actually, I wanted it to be longer than a trilogy, but then I ended up cutting it down and shortening it for publishing sake.
So it sounds like you have a very expansive universe to write in.
Mhm. Mhm. Actually, I do, which I do that all the time, and I don't know why. It just, I guess I think big. So a lot of my books have a lot of characters in it.
Yeah. And what age group are they for? Adult, young adult? What would you say?
The Sin Eaters actual devotion book series is supposed to be for adults. You can read it at 18 on up. I don't have a problem with that. Parents shouldn't have a problem with that. Yes, there's a lot of violence in it because this is a supernatural book. Yes, there is romantic sex in it, but it's nothing that you have to worry about.
It's not like porn or something. Yeah. Okay.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And then Rebel Guardians, this short for this one is in the YA. Well, actually, new adult because it's new adult because they're in college. They're college age.
And are you deliberately targeting a certain age group for marketability, or
actually,
is this just
no.
This is right in your wheelhouse?
Yes, this is in my wheelhouse because the Rebel Guardians deals with 2 sets of Guardians that are introduced in Sin Eater series. So you have to read book 1 to understand who these 2 young men are. And so that just happened to fall that way. I chose to do their stories because I did have some fans that were interested in knowing who they are, Darren and I call them Dare and Take. And so they were interested in knowing more about Darren Take and his sister Amari, and the triangle between, the friendships between them and the romances that's supposed to go on between them all. So because Dare and Amari are twin siblings, so they're brother and sister, and so they wanted to know about them, and it's the same with the other Guardians. They wanted to know more about Calvin and the Medusa. I ended up telling that story in Sin Eaters 2 Retribution, but I'm going to expand upon their story a little bit more in the short. And then they wanted to know more about all the characters, actually. It wasn't just the
Right.
two leads that they wanted to know more about, but certain fans connected with certain characters, and they wanted to know more, so I decided to do the short.
That's brilliant, because what it does is, well, you know how a lot of readers, once they get invested in characters or once they get invested in a creative universe, will go ahead and purchase and read, everything they can out of that universe. So, authors who are able to put together multiple volumes like that often see a little bit more success than authors who, every single book is out of a different universe and things like that. The fact that you write longer books also gives people more time to invest in the characters and invest in the story. What kind of, when you in your devotion series, excuse me, what kind of feedback have you gotten? You've got great reviews, but when you've talked to people, what kinds of things are they liking out of the series?
Well, that's one of the things I'm learning as an emerging author on how to gauge the fans.
Right.
I only have a very few that actually speak back and forth about the books. So I'm still trying to gauge what specifically some of them like about it. But overall, they say the same thing. Like, they love the imagery. They love that as they read it, it feels like they're in a movie. And they keep saying, when are you going to make this a movie? And they keep saying, when are you going to make this a graphic novel and stuff like that? So that's one of the major notes of feedback that I get from the fans consistently. Some other things is they just say they didn't expect the book to be in the written the way it was. They were expecting it to be like a traditional kind of paranormal kind of book, and it's really not.
Okay. Oh, excuse me. So it is, and then when you write, are you kind of like a singular, insular writer? Do you write and write and write and write, and then once you're close to being done, you will go ahead and let other people read it, or do you have people read as you go along and give you kind of feedback? What's your process like a little bit?
Well, my process is procrastination, but no, I'm notoriously bad with it. With Sin Eaters, that book took me maybe, I had written it beforehand, but I hadn't finished it. It was maybe 10 chapters, and then I introduced it to my friend who read it over, and she was like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. Can I get more of that, please? And so that's where my writing style ended up coming from, where I would send her stuff, and she would give me feedback and stuff like that. It was just like she became my natural beta reader, I guess, and I didn't know what a beta reader was until later. But she would read it and you say, give me more, you better give me more, stop procrastinating, stuff like that. She was my writing angel on my back. So so that's how my style is, and I still kind of do that. Sometimes when I'm not procrastinating, I do just sit and write. But majority of the times I like to pause and breathe, because I don't like looking at the monitor all the time for too long. So then when I'm doing that, that's when I send it over to her and she reads it.
How long did it take you to write, the first volume of the Devotion series? Well,
I had written the first part, the 10 chapters of it I had it sitting on my computer for maybe a year or two. And then when she told me to expand on it, she just expanding on it, I went back in, and it took me maybe only 4 months for Sin Eaters, maybe 4 or 5 months to finish it all.
Right.
I remember it was spring, so I was done right when June came around.
Well, that's still pretty good. Do you think the reason why you can write that quickly, or at least, get it out that quickly, despite, your claims of procrastination, do you think that is because you're driven, you're focused? Are you completely immersed in it? And does it come easy when you're writing?
Well, with Senators, I would have to say the first book, yes, it was. I was invested in it because it just felt like something I had to write. I had a dream about it, so I wrote those first 10 chapters out just to get the dream out of my head, and then from there, once I saw that somebody actually enjoyed it, I said, well, okay, let me try this writing thing. And so, and it just, I started typing, and it just kept flowing and going, because there was times when I had super long chapters, and she was like, you need to chop that down, and because it just with this first book, it just kept coming out like water. I guess I had an anointing on me or something, because for that book, it came very easy. It didn't get hard until it was time for editing. I hate editing, and it didn't get hard for me to write until I got to the second book. The second book destroyed me, and it still destroys me. But yeah, the first book, that I have to say, that is my baby. Like, I can tell you specific parts of it that I love to death, and specific parts that I don't like, because I was that invested in it.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that early on you were an artist. Have you created any art for your own books? I mean, your covers are very compelling, and they're very well done. How much did you draw those? Let me just ask that.
No, my drawing is not that great. And it could have been. Okay. It could have. Honestly, it could have been. My drawing could have been better. But I'm a procrastinator, and I'm horrible. I'm a Libra, so like I can start projects and I just drop them and go about my way. And that's how it was when I would draw. I can draw. I can do it. I took an art class and did a painting, did a chalk art in my college years, and it was great. The chalk art came out very beautiful, and I didn't know I could do that, but I did. And so I'm also a slight nerd, kind of geeky at that time on the computer, so I taught myself how to use Photoshop. So the only cover that I designed myself was Rebel Guardians. That's the only one I did myself. I'm a little bit like you, although I have no talent at all at drawing, but I had the ideas for covers, and I was able to convey those ideas to other people who were much, much better at executing than I was. Right.
But and I'm a Libra too. I don't think I'm as good a Libra as you are, because I don't get stuff done the way you do. No, I'll be honest. Process is very important to me, because when I write these big, large books, I want to get them done. And, 250,000 words per book isn't easy,
Exactly.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I agree with you. If I'm in I have to be in a specific mode to get that way. And usually it's really horrible, and I can zone people out when I get into that mode. It's a scary place. And it's like I actually turn into Kylie's, because Kylie's is my pen name. I cease being my real name. And so, like, when I get into that zone, I don't want to be bothered. I don't want to be messed with. I need quiet, or if I don't, I need music. And it's just like, I got to get this done, and I got to get it done now, and I've done that with some books. So some stuff that I have done, not books, but with some of my like schoolwork and helping around the house, or helping somebody with their designing another cover. I've done that, where I just like zone out, just like, let me get this done.
Are you temperamental? Do you think you're temperamental, when you're in your process?
Yes. I'll be honest, yes. Yes.
So people just ought to leave you alone, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So
Well, there's
yeah.
nothing wrong with that.
When I get into that zone, usually I'm half in that zone, half out. That my normal state of writing is I'm half in, half out. But when I decide to jump all the way into the pool, yeah, I'm not an easy person to be around in.
Well, let me ask you this: do you live alone?
Not anymore right now.
Yeah,
but it was
easier
when I was at home.
Yeah, I don't know if I would have ever become a writer had I not been alone. You know, I just question about myself. Would you have done this had you not started living by yourself? So, I mean, I thought the process is always interesting to me because I think everybody has a different process. Everybody seems to have, their way of doing things. I know one friend who's on the West Coast who can write 10 stories a day if he puts his mind to it. And then, I have other friends who have been working on books for years and still haven't gotten them done,
Yeah, yes. I have the same friend. She whips them out. Even when I'm like just sitting here, I'm like, what are you doing today? And I'm just watching TV, being in my procrastination mode and fiddling around on Facebook, knowing I should be writing. She's busy writing, and she knocks them out. I'm sitting here like, I'm a little jealous, but I'm not, because once I get into the writing, I don't feel like it. So.
Yeah. Okay, and so in your first volume of devotion, give us paint a picture for us of what your universe is like.
Oh, well.
And what's the basis for maybe even the plot of the story?
Okay. The world is basically, the plot is this. Okay. I'm not good at pitching. I'm horrible at that. But basically, Senators revolves in current day Chicago, Illinois, and actually the book opens in Chicago. I don't say it, but it opens in Chicago, and then it leads to St. Louis with the lead character who is named Sana Bishop. And the story is based around her. She is a unique individual who doesn't know that she's unique, who's just, living her everyday life. She has her own restaurant. She's a budding chef on the rise with her best friend, who is her god sister, Kyle. And they both run a restaurant downtown St. Louis, and things start getting heaviest when they are serving a guest that refuses to leave. It's then that the reader becomes introduced to the person in the prelude, which is the attacker. And he and his people come around, and her life changes drastically when her restaurant is set on fire, and it leads her all into this undercover paranormal world sub-life in St. Louis and in Chicago, Illinois, revolving around Sin Eaters. Well, actually, not Sin Eaters, I'm sorry, Nephilim. She learns around about the Nephilim, which are half human, half angels, that are meant to guard us all in the world and protect us from the curse. And then it goes into a huge battle against good versus evil, and Sana's in the middle of it all.
I love those. You mentioned that essentially your genre is fantasy, and when to ask that, let me ask a little bit about that. Is there kind of any religious bent in the book, any kind of religious subtext?
Yes, it actually is, and it really wasn't on purpose. Like, I'm not a Christian writer or anything like that. It just fell that way because I'm dealing with the world of Nephilim. So basically, you learn when you're reading through the book. There are individual chapters within the whole book called, which are the real devotion books. And the devotion books is something that Sana and everybody are searching for, because it will tell the history of the Nephilim, because they lost their history. They don't know who they are, and they don't really remember why they are supposed to do the things they do. They're just doing them. And so throughout the book, you will read certain experts of, the Bible, and I do my twist on it, on certain stories and mythologies that are in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And it leads them on to, the history of the Nephilim.
Well, it doesn't sound like it's so much religious subtext, but what it's using is current. Oh, and if I almost said mythology, but Christians will get mad at me. But it's taking current day reality, the mythology that we live with, the Christianity we live with, whatever, and what you're doing is you're injecting, another kind of subplot in that, bringing the fantasy forward.
Mm-hmm. But true, because I use a lot of in senators current events that goes on. So what was something major that had happened? I think there's in one chapter you will read it when Sana is really dropped into the world and she's aware, and she's now woke and mentally of her surroundings, where she's being chased by this millionaire. And
right.
The millionaire, like at that time, there was a guy that was on the news for, I think he had not kidnapped, but held his maid hostage or something, and was just doing foul things. I don't remember it clearly right now, but I used some of that in the book.
Well, I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I mean, I didn't write, kind of like with current culture in mind just because it was easier. I generally write with current culture in mind for two reasons. One, I don't have to explain the memes. I don't have to do much exposition because it's familiar. I can jump right into the story without having to work so hard to build a backstory so that people understand what's going on.
I think I'm the same way.
Yeah, and I think that's it's a useful device for me because most of what I write has to do with today's culture and examining it from a different perspective. So, I mean, the underpinnings of writing like that are not, they're a little bit easier. They require less buildup. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. And so when you take kind of today's current culture and you apply your universe's mythology to it, at least it lets people, obviously from the reviews, people like jumping into that story and they recognize that you've got kind of like the eternal battle between good and evil. And it appears that people are liking your perspective on that. Was that again born of, okay, I've got this character, what am I going to have happen around the character, or did you look at, where you were possibly going with the story and decided it was going to be of kind of like an epic construction?
I think it was a fusion of both because I had always felt how it came to me in a dream. I knew that this book was supposed to be longer than the two books that it is. And so when I had to condense it, that's when those kind of thoughts start coming to my mind, like, okay, where do I want this to go? And, how do I want their world to, flourish? And so, yeah, that it was like a fusion of what you just exactly said.
That's pretty. It sounds like your mind is not only creative, but you're able to encompass a bigger construct. When you first started writing, did it come real easy to you, or like I read books on writing to try to understand the process a little better and to hopefully make me a better writer. When you started out, how was that? How was the ramping up of your creativity?
Yeah, that part of it, actual writing, all of that, the formatting and all that, no, that does not come easy to me. That's one of my Achilles heel.
Mm-hmm.
That right there, because I did not go to school for English or anything like that. I did not. I did take creative writing, creative lit, and I did, do mythology and all of that because I just love to read. But the writing part, no, yeah, that I don't read How to Write 101. I don't. I haven't done any of that, and I know I need to just to get better. But yeah, no. I'm really organic.
Ain't nothing wrong with that. I mean, if the process works for you, I mean, that's great. All right, so you've got this trilogy, but you also mentioned that you might have more books in that universe coming.
Mm-hmm.
Did I hear you say that earlier?
Yes, that's Rebel Guardians.
Yeah. So, and how far are you going to take this? Are you going to be writing in this universe for a while? What is your overall plan?
Right now, my overall plan is to have it be, I think 7 books total.
Okay.
Because it's going to be shorts that I'm going to fuse together into one big book individually. So the first set will be Rebel Guardians, and there will be 2 shorts. And then the second one will be Dark Guardians or something like that. And what it does is introduces you to the different type of Guardians that are in Sin Eaters. And I share some of the characters from Sin Eaters in those, but I'm going to also introduce totally new, different people as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And do you think this is a universe where you're going to write in it exclusively? Do you think you may have other people come in and collaborate? Or have you even given it any thought?
Actually, I don't know. When I was wrapping up Sin Eaters 2, one of the things I said to my fans, I'm like, if you guys want more, just let me know. Right now, I don't feel like you guys do, but if you do, let me know, and I'll see what can happen, where I'll go with it. Because for myself personally, I knew that I did want it to go to be a full-blown World Series. So now that I added on this new scope to it, branching off of the Sin Eaters world, but staying in it, it just depends. For me, it depends on the readers. If they want more, then I'll do more, if I can do it. And, I'll keep going and expanding, but I don't want to exclusively be just the Sin Eaters writer, because I'm still growing my fan base, but I do want to write in other genres as well.
Yeah. Somebody in the chat room says, "Why are you basing your decision on that?"
Yeah.
But you do get feedback from readers. You get reviews.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've had people even come up and say, "Hey, how far are you taking this?" And it's very funny because I've picked. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say it just for me. It's just with this book, it just depends on it. It's like I really do. I don't want to continue to write something if nobody's going to really read it. Is what it came to when I finished book 2. So if nobody's going to really read it, what's the point of me continuing it?
Well, exactly. And there are some people who write for the love of the game, but I think we all would like to, if we're writing, to get people to buy what we're writing. Yeah. And if nobody's going to buy it, it seems like, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me economically to spend 6 months out of the year writing a book, and then you put it up someplace and nobody buys the thing. So
right,
and
that's not even based on anything with money at all. That's just based on entertainment. I'm like, if I'm not entertaining you, why should I continue to write in that kind of zone? And I don't write just for me, because I did not come from that core of saying I wanted to be a writer. I didn't. I came from the core of I just had these stories in my mind, and it just led me to actually writing. So
Well, no, I mean, yeah, and you're gonna know you're going to know. I mean, and some people even find, okay, this got a little stale for me, time for me to refresh or for me to build a new universe or whatever. I would love to have people read my books. Even more so, I'd like to see them either made into a miniseries or a set of movies. But my reasons are not merely economic. They are also, I would like to see what I have to say about today's culture dealt
reflected.
with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'm working on a book now that talks about, this 400-year plus trend of, cops and whites killing blacks with impunity. I mean, it's long past time for that to stop. So, and that's something that I want to talk about. So, anyway,
I'm doing a book read. I'm still writing.
I know, yeah, I know. And the other thing that kind of pisses me off is, I write, I've got like 750,000 words in the Dark Side trilogy, and I don't know, I made less than $10,000 on the books, mostly because there's no marketing, and then I go and write, do business writing and make hundreds of thousands of dollars, and so I say to myself, okay, what's the most cost-effective way of doing your time? And obviously, creative writing is not it. If I were to just keep on doing the business writing, that's a lot of money just to write business plans. But it's hard.
It's disheartening. It's disheartening.
Yeah, it is.
But that's also reflected on the changes in the book publishing world as well. It's really hard, and I never knew it would be that hard. But I'm learning. So that's why I say, okay, let me try different things with the singers. I'm like, yes, the fan base is growing at a slow pace. So I said, okay, let me pause. Maybe on a book 3, I'll do a book 3, but let me pause and try to also show that I can write in other things. So, like, I'm trying to do a steampunk fantasy. I've never written anything about steampunk. I haven't. I enjoyed watching, Will Smith and that and Sherlock Holmes and stuff like that, but I've never written anything like that, and I've never actually read a book, steampunk-oriented book, until recently. So I decided, let me try my hand on that, and then I decided, let me try my hand on a contemporary romance thing. That was hard for me as well, because that's not, I love reading romances, but I've never written a straight alone, no fantasy tied into it at all, contemporary romance. So I'm trying to put my hands in a little bit of everything, and as well as keep my fantasy, what I wanted to write, fantasy going, because I've always wanted to see myself reflected in fantasy, in the movies and stuff, and I intend to keep on doing that.
Sure. Now, I'm guessing, obviously from the covers and the way you've described it, that your books are basically black-themed in terms of characters, correct?
Mm-hmm. It's actually a multi-cultural world, but the main characters, the 2 leads, are African-American, well, black, basically. And then her best friend is Asian, and then I go on from there. So.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, there's probably a good mix, but for you, obviously, would you? Let me just ask: Would you classify your writing as black themed fantasy?
Yeah. Yes, I would.
Yeah. And how important is that in terms of your writing? A lot of people write for an identity or because they want to write about stories about people like them. Like for me, I write about in Discovery or in the Dark Side, I write about black folks because the people I write about are people who are not known in American culture. It's like, there's no such thing as middle-class blacks or upper-middle-class blacks. I always point to the whole Heathcliff Huxtable thing where, people said, oh, a black doctor marrying a black lawyer and then having teenage kids with white problems, that's ridiculous. And those are like the kinds of people I grew up with. So why is that, why is that intolerable to American culture? So I guess my writing is kind of a counterpoint to that.
I guess so when you think of it in that kind of scope. Yeah. That's how I am now, because what happened for me was a changing point. One of my favorite paranormal writers was ending her series, her vampires at that time, and I was like, I have nobody else to read.
Right.
I have nothing.
Right.
And then on top of that, then I was like, and I'm tired of reading about people that don't look like me. So it led me to LA Banks, and then I was like, you know what? Let me just go on this note and write for me, because I'm not getting what I want. I'm not getting the romance novels with, loving curvy black female, in the books, or going after me, or me going after a fine chocolate brother. I'm not seeing that. And I'm not seeing it in abundance, and I'm not seeing it in quality. I'm not even seeing it on TV enough anymore, because at that time, all the black shows are starting to disappear. So it's just like, I'm tired. This country is this country can be so beautiful when you change the lands off of the default, So,
well, not only that, but if you look at this country realistically, this is not an all-white country.
Exactly.
And
it's time that it was shown.
Why can't there be stories? Yeah. Well, I'm sorry.
No, that's what I'm saying. That's why I like the whole campaign for diversity in YA writing, and diversity in fantasy, and diversity in sci-fi, all of that, because we should be in the future. We should be on Star Trek. We should be, out there going after Predator like Snilanka. I actually only like that movie because of her.
Right.
So,
and
we should be that.
Yeah, and the other thing about it is we should have, entertainment, writing and movies like that available so that our kids can see it.
Exactly.
Because if they don't see anything that is reflective of who they are, it's a lot harder to imagine yourself in those kinds of positions. Hang on a second. You're listening to the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Show, a service of the Black Science Fiction Society.com website, and this is the May 29th, 2015 edition. And we are talking to Kai Leaks, who has a number of, what's the total number of books you've got out there right now?
Right now it's 3.
Just the 3. We've got and I don't mean just the 3 like in diminutive, just the 3, but just the 3 because you got 4 more on your plate already, right?
Yes.
Let's talk about kind of, we already know that you just jumped into writing, and apparently you did quite well at it. Are you seeing a bigger canvas for your work? Like, let's say maybe, obviously you write in a visual style, otherwise people wouldn't say to you, hey, I could see this as a movie. So are you looking at hopefully branching out to getting your books in as a visual medium, as maybe movies or a miniseries or something like that?
I would actually love that. I occasionally look up information on how to do screenwriting, because I really don't know how to do any of that. So that's my next thing. So, yeah, and I like I said, my drawing is not that great, but I have spoken to some people about graphic design, designing a comic book. I've follow a whole bunch of illustrators and things like that. So yeah, I'm my mind is always on how to expand this brand and see it, because if you see it, if I see that, that's the day, my day will be just very awesome if I see it on film or anything like that.
Yeah, and so, well, even if you can't do the screenplay yourself, if you have a great idea and you have a lot of people who like the story, you can always get someone else to do the screenplay for you.
This is true.
Yeah, that's not necessarily something that you have to do yourself. People go, oh, did you write the script for Discovery? I go, no, I can't. I'm not that good yet. And I do No, I do movies. I produce movies and write screenplays all the time. But I know my limitations, too. I'm just not that good.
Right.
So, okay, you've got 7 books here. What are you going to, like, pop them out maybe one a year? Do you have a schedule yet or not?
For the shorts, yeah, I decided that I may do them either one a year or 2 books a year for the shorts while I'm working on the main books. Just to spread them out because I don't want to, dump them all out in one. Yeah. And then everybody's like, well, when is the next one? When is the next? You're already asking me when is the next one as it is, but I feel like if you start dumping them out faster, it's just, like you said, oversaturates the market.
Well, I mean, Stephen King for one, I think for a minute there he was putting out like one every other month, it seemed like. And it didn't hurt him, but he's also got a great following. Let's talk a little bit about the business of being an author. For you, what do you do to, in terms of marketing? How are you getting your word out? How are you marketing? I should ask, did you self-publish these or do you have a publisher?
I'm on with the publishing company with the first 2 books. Rebel Guardians, I self-published myself.
Right. So in terms of, the working on your own, how do you see, what are you doing to get your name out there and what are you doing in the service of marketing?
Well, that's where I'm still trying to learn. So far, I've done a few book signings here and there, not enough in my opinion, but I only can do so much right now. And I'm all through social media now. So I do the majority of my marketing on Facebook and occasionally on Twitter and on my website. So
yeah,
my marketing campaign is not that great.
Well, I mean that's a challenge for everybody. If you don't have a publisher behind you that puts together a marketing budget, it's very hard for a self-published author to try to build a campaign like that without a lot of money.
Yeah, and that's exactly where I'm at with it. Yeah.
And about how much time do you spend in the service of doing the business of being an author compared to how much time you spend doing the writing? Is it like the 80%, 20% kind of thing?
Yeah, more so I do more writing than I do the marketing part because I don't know what to do, and I'm a very shy person, so I don't like going in people's faces like, buy my book. You won't see me like driving around St. Louis with my books in the trunk going, buy my book. Though I know it works, I'm just too shy of a person to do that because I'm scared somebody will be like, what's wrong with you?
Well, it's it's not very cost effective because, like you said, okay, so you're driving around St. Louis doing that, and then maybe you'll drive up to Chicago and do that, and even if you sell 100 books, some people go, oh, that's great, you sold 100 books, but when you consider what it takes to be an author and how to support yourself, 100 books is not self-supporting, No,
it's not. No,
I think everybody who writes, their dream, is to be able to sustain their lifestyle just by doing the writing. I mean, that's my dream. I would love not to go to schools and pick up germs from kids. And man, I'm telling you, those germ buckets. Anyway, but it would be great if I had the luxury of just writing. But it's not an easy thing to achieve.
Exactly.
Long term for you, what are you looking at for trying to build your name as an author and try to get your name above the noise level so that other people actually discover you or they have a chance to see that you exist?
I want a commercial on TV like James Grissom. No, I'm just playing. In the long term, I hope to continue to try to get out there and do more book signings. because I do have
Right.
people that ask me to come to Chicago, and I have people that ask me to come to Detroit. And so I really do, and I've noticed that my sales are higher in Detroit and a little in Chicago, not that much on Amazon. So I do want to go up there, back up to Chicago and go to Detroit and go where, people are asking me to go and do signings. But my main goal is also to hook up with some cons, like Comic Cons, and, market my book out there to more readers out there, and get them invested. Because I don't find a lot of Black readers here in St. Louis, at least, that are aware of my book or aware of my genre and willing to read, about the angel hybrid vampires, saving us, from whatever, or fighting in the street,
Well, I mean, that's a good question, though. I mean, as you travel around the area where you live, St. Louis, and the last time I was in St. Louis was a few decades ago, and everybody looked like Leon Spinks, but that it's probably changed. I'm sure the city has much, much better dental work than that. Excuse me, but I mean, when you drive around, do you look at libraries? Do you look at, the bookstores? I mean, do you have a lot of bookstores down there?
We used to. It was a Barnes & Noble up the street from where I live, and then they closed. I was like, no, because that was my addiction.
Right.
But, the area is changing a lot. There's not many bookstores, and I don't think too many people go to the library much anymore in this area anyway. So, yeah, it's kind of iffy on that end.
And so probably limited, just in terms of, a tank of gas, you probably don't have that many customers anyway.
Yeah. And not customers that read what I write. The majority of the last book signing I went to, I learned that a lot of them are reading, Christian lit and Black Christian lit and Black contemporary romance novels, with all of that. And I don't write in that right now. So
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I just thought of something from what you said. I think a couple years from now, I want to do an Afrofuturism book fair here in Chicago, because it's not an expensive thing to do, and there's certainly enough of us in the Midwest to do it. You know what? I'll get in touch with you on that later. I'm thinking about people like Yatasha Womack. We've got Ronald T. Jones, who lives here. There's a number of people here in Chicago who could probably help me put something like that together. But the other part, I mean, the part B about being like an Afrofuturist author, and that covers, both horror and or horror, fantasy, and science fiction, is that in some ways we're going to have to grow our own audience. Because
That's what I'm learning.
I don't think organically it's happening on its own. And so, the challenge is figuring out how do you get kids to read. Now, kids will gravitate toward comic books because it's a very accessible medium to them. But how do you get kids to read short stories and novels? And I think that's the challenge, one of the challenges that we face. Do you have any ideas? Do you deal much with younger kids, helping them read or anything like that, or not that everybody does, but I don't, But I mean,
I used to in my master's.
Yeah, how do we get kids to read? Something other than comic books, and I think that's our challenge, and I think that's something that we're going to have to think about, because with fewer and fewer people reading, and bookstores in Black neighborhoods are almost non-existent across the country. So
we only have one in my area.
Yeah, the one that we had here that I worked with, he basically went out of business. So, but he's only doing online, and he had a huge children's section. I mean, parents would come in there and buy books, but obviously just not enough. Well, he also had bad luck to be in a bad mall too. But I mean, it's hard. It's hard because what are our schools teaching our kids?
It's a huge disconnect. I know when I was younger, we had a whole bunch of reading programs. Back in Iowa, we had the Pizza Hut reading program, so we get little stickers, and if we bought a whole bunch of books, it would add up to getting a meal for the family at Pizza Hut. Then we also had our the Reading Rainbow program, and then we had something else where it gave you an incentive to read. They had the book fairs and all of that. Now, all of that is gone. It's so weird.
Well, getting on my political soapbox, back during Nixon, Nixon declared war on the intelligentsia because the anti-war movement came out of high school and college campuses. Mm-hmm. And it is no secret that this country's devotion to education has declined so much in the last 2 generations that it's not funny. And you get people always talking about, we got Common Core, we got this, we got that, and yet in the last, let's see, what was it, from 72 until 2008, the SAT and the ACT scoring indexes were revised downward 16 times. Well, that doesn't happen by accident. That happens by design because, the people who run this country have a huge investment of the fact in the fact that stupid people are easily read. Ignorant people are easily read. People who don't read are easily led. So, how do we reverse that and get our kids interested? Someone says, we start them out with comic books and then try to transition them to novels or short stories, but still making that transition, that's not an easy thing. But I think that's something that we have to
they have to bring back the reading programs. They're starting to do that, but math programs and stuff, which is great, and engineering programs and all of the technology programs, all of that, that's great. But they also need to, reiterate the reading programs and bring those back for the children. And since everybody's about technology, add that in there as well. Because I'm sure everybody is visual now, it seems. So interactive comic books would be great. Interactive reading books would be great.
Not only that, but right now, the majority of African Americans in this country get something like 80 or 90% of their information through their mobile device.
Mm-hmm.
So, like you said, taking advantage of current technology is probably the way to go. But it's still kind of boring to try to read it.
But also, love for the physical books, because I love physical books, and I don't ever want that lost. Because sometimes your laptop and your phone is not going to work all the time to read your books or your stuff. So implement both.
Well, that's true. and the screens are not conducive to it. You talk about reading in poor light or something like that.
Yeah.
Trying to read a novel off of your phone, that's got to be painful. I mean, I don't know if I could do it. So,
it's handy if I end up going to the Bahamas or something, and I'm on the beach with my, Kindle or something. But I still love my physical books.
Yeah.
And I feel like they need to add that into the programs and stuff like that, or get parents to start investing into. But that same mantra, that same question has always been there since forever, even when I was a kid, how to get the parents invested in their children's education, and in the schools and stuff like that. And so you can build your own private schools and all that, but you still got to come up with something to keep everybody invested.
There was an article in The Guardian, British website, about, and it was discussing why the last, 8 winners of the spelling bee were South Asians or South Asian families, and why is that? Why? I mean, we don't see whites, we don't see blacks, we see folks coming from, Pakistan, India, and their kids coming over here and winning our national spelling bee championships. And so the thing that they stressed in that article was how the parents are driving these kids to learn more. They're testing them on words. They're making them read books.
Hello? Hello?
Sorry about that. I think a fat person walked by my house and kind of killed my my signal. Um, so yeah, and someone says yes, but those children are U.S. citizens. Yes, they're U.S. citizens, but there's a racial divide. We still have a racial divide where you don't see the same kind of philosophy in a lot of our, well, you don't see it very much at all in our inner city schools, in our, as they say, the urban schools. So,
and I was discussing this with my friends and my mother actually. It's like, where do we come into play with all of that? How do we develop programs to keep them invested, our children invested? What do we do to just, pull them out of the public schools that are already failing, especially here in St. Louis, already failing, and just build up your own private schools? And I'm on that end, I'm like, okay, you can do that, but then you may end up with the same issues as you had in the public school, because you bring it in the same. If it's so-called the parents, and that was the problem with the public school, then moving them to another place is not going to change anything. So I on the social scope, because of my background in counseling, a psychosocial scope, I felt like maybe we need to start implementing a dynamic where, and it's sad to say, because teachers aren't being paid enough, but put in more teachers, put in more social workers, psychologists, counselors like myself that they won't hire.
I think that all of that is good.
Satellite schools and stuff.
But if the parents aren't in on the process, if the parents aren't 100% devoted, if the parent I am not railing on parents specifically, because it's tough.
Exactly.
You have to have, if you're working full time, maybe even working 2 jobs to try to make things happen. What we've done is we have made the best middle class in the history of the world, which is what we had through the 60s and most of the 70s, and we've turned them into an underclass. We've taken away their job security. We've lowered wages. We've done all these things, and so all of what you said in terms of making education better for kids, it still relies on the parents in order to be the main impetus to make those kids do what they do. And the other part is, a lot of parents, they're not really interested in their kids doing well. They're interested in their kids getting good grades and not being a problem for them. Like if their kid has a disciplinary problem, the parents come in and blame the teacher instead of their poor ass parenting skills. So I mean, there are a lot of ills in our culture, and trying to attack them all is huge. It's a huge thing.
Yeah.
I was lucky. I grew up in probably one of the most intellectually prosperous neighborhoods in Chicago. I grew up in Hyde Park, Kenwood, where Barack Obama has his home, and where the University of Chicago is. And so we were lucky because we had all of that going on, and that was also back in the 60s. So why don't we have the same thing today? And one of the things, quite obviously, is the money in education has not kept up with inflation. Okay, that's a huge thing right there. And
that's
then,
across the board, yeah.
It is. And then you have all of these I don't even know what to call them, but you have these people saying, oh, charter schools are the panacea for our educational process. And the fact of the matter is charter schools don't have any better outcomes than public schools, and they get to cherry pick their students.
Mm-hmm.
So anybody who says, oh, vouchers and all of that, taking your tax money and giving it to a private school, that's ridiculous. That's just it's such a heinous thing that they're trying to do, which is making education merely for the elite. And you know what? They don't consider black folks the elite. So, it's a huge, huge, huge thing that's going on. But I think that the reading programs can at least help. Like, I had a reading program for my kids at home. Okay, and the reading program was, when we got up in the morning on Saturday and Sunday, I would read my daughter 3 books. They're small books, but we would read.
Mm-hmm.
And she would come and wake me up and say, hey, time to read. Okay, so now she's like close to 18 now. She reads all the time.
You invested in her at an early age to love the books and reading.
Exactly. So, and the other thing is, well, I mourn the loss of our local black bookstore because all of those really cool children's books that were, black themed, black oriented, what have you, they're not available. If a parent wants to get them now, they have to go online to try to find them instead of going to your local, black themed bookstore or even black owned bookstore and finding exactly what you want. So even that is kind of discouraging for trying to find content for your kids. But I think you're absolutely right. Instilling the habit of reading at a young age is so important. And I think at this point, and I'm not trying to be sexist, but I think that girls are more likely to be readers than boys. And I know that boys can get into comic books and things like that, but in the 2 schools that I work at, I just don't see boys reading nearly as much as I see the girls.
Yeah.
What's been your experience?
Well, when I was my practicum, it was the same thing.
Right.
It's the emphasis is just they're not given to the young boys, which is sad. It's play with your toy cars. I was working with 3-year-olds on a play with your toy cars or play with these little gender specific things for the boys, and the girls are over here getting a chance to go through the little kitty library and play with their dolls and stuff, but also emphasis on the books. So it's strange. Unless you have a parent that really, really loves books, usually the boys don't get that thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's going to have to take a paradigm change in education, and implicit in that paradigm change means the total involvement of parents. And without the involvement of parents, all of the great things that you mentioned, counseling, reading programs, all of those things, they don't mean anything if there's no reinforcement at home.
And I also feel like it falls back on the teachers as well, because I know you're getting teachers that are burnt out and tired and forget that they came into the education system to help bring up children, and now you just got those. You got those where they have no. Then you have another set that are bounded by these rules of the schools that they got to follow certain programs and certain things where they can't even help the kids in the classroom. They have to take it off. They have to go off hours to help the kid. So,
right.
Yeah.
Well, and there's still teachers who have to spend their own money to pick up the kinds of supplies and things that they need in order to have the minimum necessary for their classroom.
Yeah.
So, here in Illinois, they did that bait and switch thing with the lottery. They said, the lottery is going to benefit the State Board of Education. But what most stupid-ass people don't know is that for every dollar that the Illinois Board of Education gets from the lottery, they have to return $1 back to the general fund. Now, what kind of bait and switch BS is that? And a lot of people
in Illinois,
fell for
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I lived in Illinois. I didn't really realize that part of it. I knew the first part, but I didn't realize that last part.
Yeah. So, I mean, as an entrepreneur, as a business person who is in the business of writing, I have grown to understand that in order for me to be successful in declining readership, I have to grow my own customers.
Mm-hmm.
And so that means hopefully bringing up better educated kids, and that's a huge subject to have to deal with. And I didn't want to eat up a lot of your time just talking about that, but I mean, since you're in the young adult and area, I'm thinking you have to wonder, where are my customers going to come from? With a declining readership. So it's something.
I'm only in the young adult with the Rebel Guardians, just that one story.
I know, but but even getting adults, my books are. Well, somebody said it was a cross between Ludlam and Crichton. Okay, that's great. That's very flattering. And you would think, guys would be reading what I write, but really more women are reading my books than men, which is surprising to me.
I'm the opposite now.
You have more guys reading than your stuff than women?
Yes, now. In the beginning, it was more women. Now it seems to be more guys. Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
I really don't know. Well, I started off writing it because I wanted it to be for both, but I really don't know. I guess it's just how my mind is when it comes to developing stories. I am very influenced by media and very influenced by, movies and whatnot. So how I develop the scenes and the action, it could translate well into a Michael Bay movie. I know when I had them on the highway in Chicago, blowing up cars, flipping in the air, and all of that. But and it's like Michael Bay moment right there. So it could be that. I don't know. And I thought the guys would shy away more because I have the romance in there and the sexual chemistry going on and sex scenes going on. But it hasn't. It's just, so far it seems like. It's either straight down the middle, half female, half male readers, but it's now starting to lead more to more guys.
Yeah. And have you had much interaction? Have you talked to? Do you belong to any writing groups or anything like that? Do you get together with any authors in your area?
No, I do not. Well, I did do a book signing with several of the authors here in St. Louis, but after that, I've only done that once. I don't get around with any of the other authors yet.
Now, I was just wondering what kind of synergy you had, Well, I had a writing group here that I was in. I'm very shy. I'm very shy, so when I go to those events, I'm very to myself. I sit at the table and just, say hi, smile, and just sit at the table because I'm just very shy. Yeah, well, for early on, when Oprah still had her show, and I went to writers group get-togethers and things like that, all the black writers were, they were just convinced that they would write their book, and then they would give it to Oprah, and then Oprah would put it in her book club, and then they'd be done, because
no, it worked that way.
Yeah, exactly.
She doesn't even read. You got to make sure you write what she reads.
No, she doesn't read anything. She's got at the time, she had like a 28-year-old white lady reading all the books for her. So, and then when she got busted out, or when those couple of authors were busted for having lied or exaggerated or whatever in the books, she just gave it up. And I knew when she chose Charles Dickens that the jig was up. Because the original intent was for her to be bringing brand new authors who people wouldn't have found otherwise to the forefront. I don't see how you do that with Charles Dickens. Because from what I can see, he hasn't put anything out new in a long time. But that's just maybe me. I'm maybe not looking at the right places. So
True.
and since you find writing a solitary endeavor for you, I'm watching people like at Black Science Fiction Society social website. There are people who are getting together to do collaborative works. They're putting together ideas where people can write stories in the same universe but different authors. Do you think that is that the kind of thing that you might be able to get into later? I know that at this point everything's really singular for you. But where do you think you're going to go with your writing in the future?
Well,
or do you think you're going to stay pretty much the same?
Well, I think I'm going to change a lot. I think I'm going to stay the same, but change, expand it. I have spoken with my friend about collaborating on a different world. I'm not sure if it'll be Senators or anything like that, Senators world, but it'll be something else. So, I have done that, and I have reached out to different anthologies to work on. So I'm not against working with other authors at all. I'm fine with that.
You just haven't done it.
I have with the two anthologies. I have, but they just got to be picked to be put in the book. And one of them was a sci-fi novel, and I worked with another author. We piggybacked off each other's characters and had them meet. So I did do that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, you know what? I didn't ask you. You said you were a prolific reader. I'm kind of curious who some of your influences were. Who wrote that you liked, that you can remember, maybe a little bit earlier on?
As a child, I read everything. Okay. When I was around 5th grade, my family found that I read at an advanced level. So then my grandmother went and got me Uncle Tom's Cabin. So I read that. But after that, I was into Bram Stoker, and I always read R.L. Stine. I always read The Babysitter Clubs. And then when I got maybe 12, I started going to the Harley Quinn books. But I stayed reading. At the same time, I stayed reading R.L. Stine and Babysitter Club and a little Sweet Valley High, and that's about it. My main authors that stayed with me was Anne Rice and L.A. Banks and a few of the fantasy historic romance novels that was on Harley Quinn. I can't remember their names right now, but those were my main ones. And I did read some sci-fi.
Yeah, like who?
Well, let's see, because it was around that time. I know I was reading some of the Star Trek books, but then I stopped. Because then I went back into the fantasy realm, so that was about it. Sure, I didn't have a specific favorite, sci-fi writer that I liked.
No, I was just wondering. I grew up just after the golden age of science fiction, but I read all of the golden age authors, and I think they were a huge, huge influence on me.
Oh, and I did read the classics. Jane Austen and the Bronte sisters and all that. I did love those books. And I have those collections. And Shakespeare, I stayed reading as well.
Really?
But yeah, I did.
Yeah. What did you like about Shakespeare?
Well, that had to do with my class in high school. We ended up having to recite Othello. And so the movie was out at the same time. So I really enjoyed Othello.
Right.
And so then after I did Othello, I started reading his other books, Hamlet and Midsummer Night, and all of those whole collection works of his. And I don't know why I liked them. I think it was because I felt like an adult at the time because I could understand what he was saying then.
Right.
And everybody around was like, "What is he saying?" But I felt like I could understand what he was saying, so I guess that's why I connected to
Well,
it.
it sounds more like you had like what would be considered a classical education.
Yeah, so yeah, in mythology, because I took mythology in college only because I used to read the Greek tales. I used to read the Odyssey and all of that. You know.
Right. And
I didn't read Charles Dickinson. I yes, I did. We had to for school, but I didn't read anything after that. I stayed in the mythology because I liked the mythology. I love the sirens and I love the gods. I used to name them all off and everything. As I've gotten older, I've become very relaxed on that. So,
well, I think that's classic storytelling. You know, epic adventures, good and evil. You know, man versus man. Man loves woman. Woman loves man. I think the classic themes generally tend to draw us because not only are they familiar, but they're ones that we can imagine happening. You know, that they're not so far out that you go, man, that's crazy. You know.
Somebody said like the Archer comics. Yeah,
Archie comics. Yeah.
I was X-Men. I loved all things X-Men with the comics. Yeah.
Someone put Melville there. I tried to read Moby Dick about 8 times, but I just couldn't get through it. I never,
yeah.
I mean, when I first heard the title, when I first heard the title, I thought it was a venereal disease. And so that probably messed me up on the whole thing. But, I mean, I understood the epic story of Moby Dick, but it wasn't like, it just didn't appeal to me. And I was lucky that my dad had all of these books around when I was growing up. Otherwise, I can see why, had I not had that, I probably would not have read as much as I did. You know, they tricked me. Oh, my God, did they trick me. In the hallway outside the bathroom was all of the reference books on a bookshelf. So, of course, when you're on your way in there, to spend some time, you pick up a book, and then I'm actually learning something, So that turned out well too. Another thing that gets kids interested, I think National Geographic magazine had a lot to do with a lot of kids who would at least explore other places in the world and would help maintain that interest. And you just don't see a lot of households with National Geographic anymore. I mean,
my grandmother's home.
Really?
My grandmother, she had all of those. She had a whole collection. She had what is the encyclopedia, which had the little Aesop stories in there and other folktale stories. I used to read that book all the time. So she also had the National Geographics too. So I would read, what was going on in there too. Now, like you're saying, it's just you don't see
we had the
anymore.
whole Time Life
posters.
Yeah, we had the whole Time Life library of science, nature. There was Encyclopedia Britannica. There was all kinds of stuff out there. And I think Encyclopedia Britannica just ceased publishing the book. They only have the online. Yeah, I mean, it's an expensive thing to publish those books. Yeah, it is. But who can afford a $1,500 encyclopedia?
Right, you couldn't afford it back then.
Yeah, and then when you can afford a $500 computer that can find more stuff than is in Encyclopedia Britannica.
That's true.
Yeah. So you've got your 7 books that you're going to write. You seem to have an easy way of it. I mean, I know you say you procrastinate. I know you say that it's so hard, but when you look at what you've put out, these 3 that you've put out and how quickly you've done it, you're probably going to have a fairly prolific career if you decide to stick with it. If you decided not to, let me ask you this: if somebody came to you and said, "Hey, we're going to give you a bunch of money to option your work for movies, but once we give you that money, we can do anything we want with it. You know, how would you feel about someone else taking control of your intellectual property?
I wouldn't like it at all. And I would say no. It would be hard. It would be very hard, but I would say no because I feel like I like to have the control. This is my baby. This is
right.
my work. At least give me production rights, you know. At least give me something. Don't just take it all away from me. You know, let's do it, you know, an appropriate deal here. You know, then from there I can understand you changing, you know, little things here and there and expanding or some things, you know, here and there. But if you're just going to take the book and just write your own thing and start making up stuff like Game of Thrones, no. Because he's not even done with the book yet, and they're adding their own little things in there, and it's just like, no. It has to make sense. That's my main thing. It has to make sense, and I feel like they need to have some respect to the writer and let them have at least some type of right.
But they don't. They don't give a darn about you.
No, they don't. No, they don't.
You know,
that's why I really don't care for Hollywood.
Yeah, you know, if you're lucky enough to have enough people read your books, like what's her name, Harry Potter lady.
Yes. Yes.
And knowing that if you change too much in the movies, people are going to crucify you, then you're pretty lucky.
Yeah.
You're
also
very
why
lucky.
I would do. That's also why I would fight for that, because I know them. Like for the casting, I would really, really be like, can you give me casting, you know, rights as in who to pick, because they would try to whitewash everything. I really do believe that.
I hate to tell you, but you're not going to have any influence. Okay.
No.
Just write it on a Post-it, put it up on the wall. Williams said, March 29th, 2015, if I sell my stuff,
I know.
it's out of my hands. Yeah, but I mean, it also, if it did happen, you would still get increased sales because people are always going to want to know what the source of the movie was.
Yeah. That's the plus side of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Someone wants to
but
know
I am
J.K. Rowling has made her first billion yet. Go ahead.
I think she has, actually.
For a woman who was sleeping in her car for a little while, I think she's done very well.
Yeah, very much so. And they gave her small rights. I was just like, just give me a small right. You can even title Blink and a Nod, Kylie's at the end.
Yeah.
Just small right. And she's very vocal on some of the things that get to happen. They don't probably listen to her all the time, but you know.
Well, like I said, she's in a very enviable position. You know,
yes.
in another example, you know, when we go back a little further, I think the one movie that has had the most influence on science fiction movies ever since it's come out, which is Blade Runner. You know, when Philip K. Dick read the first script for that, he told him to take his name off of it. You know, because it was such a terrible script, and it went through so many iterations, blah, blah, blah. And then finally, when they invited him to see the first cut of the movie, you know, he was sitting there crying, said, "How did you guys get in my head?" You know, which I think is probably the luckiest thing that could happen for him. Not everybody's going to get that.
Yeah, right. We all wish we could, but yeah,
right.
This is Hollywood. Not everybody's going to get that.
Yeah. If you were going to, let's say we put you, even as shy as you are, we give you a Valium and maybe a little bit of alcohol, and we put you in front of a bunch of young, aspiring writers. If you could tell them a few things about what you've learned about the writing process, what would those be?
I learned that everything takes its time, and it happens when it's ready to happen. So that's what I would tell them. I'll also say stick to it. Yeah. I'll also say stick to if you feel like you can do this, if you feel like this is where you want to go, stick to it. You may have times where you want to just give up. I say take those times just to step back and break, you know, just for a little bit and then get back to it. But don't let anybody change your words. Don't let anybody change how you see your stories going. Just work through it, write if you can, and create and go.
And what's the worst lesson that you've learned as a writer?
I knew that you were gonna. I knew that being a writer, you would be broke, but I just didn't realize how broke. That's one of the worst things I learned. So, but no, the worst things I learned was the editing. I hate editing. I hate it with a passion, and I turn into a foul beast when it's time to edit. So I learned that make sure you have an editing team behind you that can work through you with it, because that's going to be one of the hardest parts of it, because you're going to be chopping and taking away from your baby, basically. And it's hard. It's very hard.
Well, because you don't have maybe one of the top 5 publishers behind you yet, one of the roles of editors is they take your work and they pee on it a little bit to make it partly theirs. And that's just something that you learn in the business. What do they say? Those who do, those who can't either teach or edit.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another good point. Yeah, and you'll learn that not everybody is going to want to read your book, and your family, and not everybody is going to support you with your book. And that's okay as long as you support yourself. Keep on going. Yeah,
there's a spectrum of ego that I think is necessary in order to be a writer. One, the good part about it is being able to stay true to your work. That's a great part of ego. But the other part of ego is not listening to other people who actually have something
to give. Yeah, I have that bad.
To say, yeah.
I have that bad because I'm very protective of my characters and what I write. I see it a specific way sometimes, where it's just like, you may not get it, but trust me, this is where I want it to go. And that happened with one of my current ones that I just finished writing. It was like, I was being told, you should do this, that. You should turn it this way, that. And I'm like, but I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I had to just let it write out and show where my mind was going with it. And then that's when that person got it. It was like, okay, now I get it. That makes sense. And I love that you did that. So, yeah, it's hard. Ego is hard. Ego is very hard.
When you run into that situation, are you able to sometimes see another person's perspective, or are you just really dead set on your own? The only reason why I ask that is my first manuscript was 750 pages, which is an impossible first book for somebody. And I did get a good editor, and she cut it down to 500 pages, which is a third. She took a third out of there. And there were some words in there that I was in love with, certain phrases, certain scenes and stuff. And she said, you don't need it. And then right around the same time, I read a book from John Gardner on being a novelist. And one of the things that he said in order that made it hard is he said, if there's something in your story that's not moving the story forward, take it out. Now that's tough.
See, that it is, because I'm very blind to that. I feel like everything I write is supposed to be there, otherwise I wouldn't write it. So that's the hardest part for me when it comes to editing as well, because I get told that a lot, like, just move the story forward. And I'm thinking I'm moving the story forward, but then I'm being told that I'm not, but then it's supposed to be cut out. And I'm like, but I feel like that's very important, because that's who that person is, or that's a situation to help have an understanding about whatever's going on at that time, But I'm very. I seeing it from the other person's eyes is very hard for me when I am in that mode of trying to protect my work. And I know they mean well all the time. And it's just hard for me, because, like I said, I always feel like everything I write has a reason for it. Now, when I notice that it's not supposed to be there, then I'll cut it out myself. But I don't know. I think that's one of the things I have to learn to accept and listen to as well.
Yeah, my next book I'm going to have, I've had other editors, I've had editors help me edit my books, but this next book I'm actually going to go with a pro because I want to see what she is going to do, what she is going to, how she's going to do, because I have my own style, and it is what it is, and I'll be the first one to say that it's not the most efficient. It's probably I know it can use work. I mean, I consider myself a work in progress, and I hope that each successive book that I write is better than the previous. But there's a whole lot of people out there who know a whole lot more about this process than I do, and so
that's true.
I'm very curious to see someone else who's done this, really, really well and really, really professionally is going to say about my writing, because it has not stood that test yet. Yeah. So, there's a certain curiosity about that I have about the process.
Same here. Same.
Yeah, I ran into a situation for the first time ever in this previous book that I wrote. I was getting near the end, and then I realized that what I was writing was not going to get me to the ending that I wanted. And I actually had to throw away 4 chapters. Yeah. That was the hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life, because I felt like you. If I wrote it, it belonged there. But then when I was reading through it, I saw, you can't get there from here. And so that was the hardest thing for me to do, because 4 chapters is an incredible amount of work. I mean, you know that. And so when you find out that all of a sudden it's not right, I mean, have you ever had to face that kind of dilemma?
Yeah, well, I had that all with Senators 2, Retribution. That whole book was a huge challenge for me, because I had actually written it one way. The way you guys got it is not the way I had originally wrote it. And that was the first time I threw out a whole book, and it hurt me. But I wasn't feeling it. I wasn't feeling it like Senators 1. And even when I did the rewrite for what you guys got now, I still don't feel it. Like I would rewrite it all again. So, yeah, I have had that happen for the first time, and I've never had that, and it really hurts, because I don't like throwing away stuff unless it's something that I feel like it's just going on too long. And like currently on my steampunk book, I stopped towards the end because it's like I can't see my ending all the way right now.
Right.
So I feel like I have to go back and rewrite that too, possibly, where I know I'm going to be cutting some things out as well, because I've never written steampunk before. So
and get it focused back toward where it's supposed to go. A friend of mine wrote her first steampunk short story. And she said she thought it was great. It was just perfect. She said, and she had worked on it a lot. And then she realized in one scene, someone walked into a room and flipped on an electric light switch.
Well, you can have that, though, I've been told. You can have that. Explain it. If you explain it, you can have that.
Yeah, but she wanted to be original to the original intent, which means, no electricity. Everything else is done.
Yeah.
And she was so heartbroken because she had to just rewrite. I suppose she could have gone and said, well, he lit the gas lamp or whatever, but she said that there was some other stuff in there, and she had to go through and change the whole thing because of that one little slip up. And I told you, I told her, I feel you. I had to get rid of some great action. Have you ever written anything? And I understand about the third book, we're having to redo it, and I understand an author's tendency to never be done with a work, even though it's published. Because I go back and read my stuff, and I go, oh, I really should change this. I should change that. Has anything ever really struck you where you just cringed and you looked at your past work and you cringed, saying, oh my God, how did I even do that?
Yes.
No, and I don't ask you that to embarrass you, but I mean, I think writing is an
That's natural for
evolutionary
anybody.
project. Yeah, I think
Mm-hmm.
writing is an evolutionary project, and I think that you can literally edit forever if you're a
Yeah.
writer and you're invested in quality and you're invested in telling a good story. So I think that's something that we all face.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
Yeah, yeah. And we got about 5 minutes left. Is there anything you want to talk about that we didn't cover?
Not that I can
mean,
think of. I think we went through a lot, actually.
Yeah, I'm good. But I mean, like, when you think about your process, is there something that sticks out in how you put your stories together that is really important to you? I mean, like, we know that you're pretty much character driven instead of story driven to start with. Your genesis is looking at, oh, this is an interesting character. This woman here could do X, Y, Z. Is there anything about that process that you would recommend? What about that process makes it so good for you?
Well, I guess I'm a special bird, so I love it because I can hear my character speaking to me. So I could be in the kitchen and I'm having a conversation with Common. That's the lead character, and talk to him about what he's doing and what the struggle he is going through being what he is. And I enjoy that and enjoy talking to Sana and her, having to deal with finding out about the whole world and everything like that. I enjoy those kind of things because it helps me just break away from my own reality and certain things going on, and I can just dwell into their world and just sit and just listen or see in my own mind what they're going through. So
someone described it. Someone described it to me as literary schizophrenia.
Yeah,
having those conversations and those voices. No, and not from a you're sick and you need help kind of way, but to use that as the creative process, I think also helps you produce work that's more natural, because it's grounded in real conversation and real situations, things that you can see, and obviously your subconscious is drawing from real life situations to kind of put those together to make them real. So having those conversations in your head, as long as you're not saying them out loud in a crowded bus or something like that. Although, actually, if you're going to do that, just put a Bluetooth in, and then people will assume you're talking to somebody else.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, stop and think about it. 20 years ago, if people were walking around talking to themselves, folks would cross the street or their friends would say, hey, you really have to cut the drinking out or whatever it was. Nowadays, you're just talking to somebody who people can't see.
Exactly.
So anyway, we're down to about our last couple minutes here, and normally Jarvis is on and he kind of closes out the show, but he left all the control. He left the controls in my hand, and he didn't. He didn't call in. But I want to do this. I want to thank you very much for your time. I mean, to share your experiences, to share what you do. We're all thankful for, because what it does is it gives people a peek into someone else's mind who may be doing similar things to them, and picking up some insight into someone else's process, I think is a good thing. So I want to thank you for being here today, and keep up the writing. Come back. Show us all your cool stuff. I can't read all the stuff that all of these great authors and content creators do at BlackScienceFictionSociety.com, but there's so much here, so much talent here, that when I retire and I'm on that rocking chair on the front porch and the kids aren't on my lawn, so I can't yell at them, there's a lot of stuff I want to read. I do want to take a look at one of your books over the summer. So anyway, I want to thank you for coming on by. After we stop the recording, just hang on in case anybody in the chat room has any further questions for you. And for those of you listening, I want to thank you for stopping in. Thank you for putting up with my bad voice, because I've had a cold. And
Thank you all for having me.
yeah, it was great having you. And then let's see, Jarvis would want to thank me for being the entertaining person I am. He wants to thank other people for doing, the support that they give for not only the radio show but at the home base, BlackScienceFictionSociety.com. Tell your friends, tell your families, that not only are we live Friday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, but we have a host of shows that are pre-recorded on our YouTube channel and also on the TalkShoe homepage. So on behalf of an absent Jarvis for right now and everybody else, thank you very much, Kai, for being here. And hang on when we're done recording, and we'll chat for a couple minutes. Everybody have a great week ahead of you. Have a good weekend for those of you who are listening live, and we'll see you again next week. Good night. 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 Good night.